I'm Hal Wolf, President and CEO of HIMSS, and it's a pleasure to be here.
It is a pleasure to have you here again, Hal. I feel like I need to give you one of those coffee cards where if you've done the fifth one, then you can get a...
I actually have one right here, and I was hoping that if we could, bring it forward.
You get yourself some nail stickers. There you go.
There you go.
So it's great to be able to have a chat again here in Paris, this time at HIMSS Europe, Hal. So, been a great couple of days, still another day to go. Tell me about the vibe and the conversations that have been happening here at HIMSS Europe.
Wow, it has been deep. I mean,
yeah.
I have to admit, that you go through and you look at the sessions that have been occurring, they've been packed. It's been wall to wall. And in fact, in a few cases, people were trying to drag in chairs to expand it. And the authorities had to come in and say, hey, no, we're already over capacity. And these are big rooms. These are not small rooms.
Yeah.
So it's been very deep. But there have been two things, going on significantly in Europe. One is the data space. The other is the AI Act. Both of them are now, freshly a year old plus, depending upon where you look at it. So the implications of the regulatory environment here have really been taking hold. And I think people are sharing and getting really good conversations. And we have people from the European Commission that are here and healthcare operations and a lot of innovation. So it has been a powerhouse of a conference.
Yeah. And I guess I think about, there's a few years of GDPR now, more than a few years now, but I look at how the implications that GDPR had on privacy globally, and many organizations want to do business everywhere in the world, and kind of when you've got a standard that is more rigorous than others, you kind of still need to, even though you might be doing business in the US or Australia or wherever you are, if you're thinking about doing something in Europe, then you're going to want to also be GDPR compliant. So as you're talking about the AI Act and other regulatory pieces, I imagine that makes sense for innovators and companies from around the world to look with interest, even if they're not based here, to look at, well, what am I going to have to do to be able to do business globally?
Yeah, literally, that was almost verbatim the conversation with one of the regulatory folks today from the European Commission. And we were talking about how HIMSS could bring in the right folks that they wanted to talk to in order to understand the impact of the regulatory up until now. They're hearing what's happening in the panels. And they literally came over and said, this is amazing. Can we kind of privatize this just a little bit and get impact? We said, sure, we'd be happy to do it. And they said, well, we'd like to talk to organizations that are in Europe. We don't want to go global too quick. We said, yeah, we get that, but you need to understand that just like GDPR, exactly what you said, when Europe leads, it leads because what happens is that systems take HIMSS in the United States. If you take the United States systems for HIMSS, and we're a global entity out of Rotterdam, out of Chicago, etc. But when you look at our back-end systems, we had to adopt for GDPR. And that, if you would, rule system has to permeate all the way through. So as soon as Europe comes up with something from a regulatory standpoint, to your point, it's a ripple effect.
Yeah.
And now the AI Act is very much in the same framework, and that's going to be the subject of a panel that I get to moderate tomorrow, which is kind of cool.
Yep.
And the same thing with the data space environment. So we're really seeing Europe take the lead much more than the United States in terms of how they're treating it. And frankly, those regulatory requirements are going to be a ripple effect, and that's what people are dealing with.
Interesting. So watching that with interest. Then I think about, your event dance card. It doesn't get quieter after this as well. We've got a few different regional events happening as well. I think the next one on the cards is APAC. Is that right?
That's right. It's coming up in July, first week. And that coincides. We're doing a co-location. So last year we did a co-location in Korea with the Korean Hospital Association. And this year it's a bigger affair, which is in Kuala Lumpur in conjunction with International Healthcare Week. And we are teaming up with WHX, which is the Informa brand for this particular line of healthcare. And we're going to do a co-location in Kuala Lumpur. So we're working really fast on this one because it is only a month away from where we are right now. Yeah. And you're looking up and you're like, oh, let's say that's 3.5 weeks. Okay. It's a different team, of course. Our Asia Pac team owns that, and they're working very hard and very fast to get ready for it.
Yeah.
But, there's only so many people at HIMSS like myself, so it'll be a little bit of flight time coming up.
Yeah. No, well, that's probably my closest to being in Australia. So looking forward to that one as well. But there's
that's relative, though, right? So the flight time from Australia to Kuala Lumpur is what? 8?
I think it's
got to be about 8.
Yeah, which is pretty not bad.
Well, I used to work in Australia for a year and a half, so flying around the region from there was, you learned, they're right next door. It's
8 hours.
It's only an 8-hour flight. In the United States, it's like, I'm going to go from one coast to the other, so it's 5.5, which is pretty big.
Yeah.
From Europe, it's more like it's an hour and a half, 2 hours, maybe 2.5 hours. And I live in Denver, Colorado, so you stretch coast to coast, 3.5, 4 hours at the most.
Okay.
But I get it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be good. But another region I'm watching with interest as well, and done some content in earlier this year was in the UAE, in the United Arab Emirates. And there's WHX Tech coming up in September as well.
Brand new event.
Yeah. So that's going to be super interesting as well. There's a HIMSS component as well for that too. You're involved. Tell me about.
There is. So we're partnering with WHX Tech. Mm-hmm. And what really happened was the old Arab Health is being fundamentally split into 2 different events.
Yeah.
One is WHX Dubai, which is a bit like the old Arab Health, but now WHX Tech is really focusing on digital health transformation. And it's a partnership that exists, and they've asked HIMSS to come along and be partners in the development of the content and really be able to bring our expertise in digital health to the forefront. We're really thrilled. Actually, here at this event, as you know, are some of the folks from WHX.
Yeah.
And they're running around and meeting with our market suppliers and with our staff. And we're planning content. And we're working away here in Paris in June to get ready for September.
Yeah. No, look, it is cool seeing... there's consistent themes in the discussions that happen in each of these regions, but all of those are kind of tailored and nuanced to those local areas. So definitely something I personally think, something interesting for people who are in those regions, but even it almost feels like a continuous conversation as I'm going around to the different events too. And topics are building on each other, particularly with fast-moving, exciting areas around generative AI and emerging technology. Even though there's only a couple of months between some of these global meetups, there's so much happens kind of on the ground. It's a good way to kind of take notes together and then work out what the impact is globally too.
It is, and the regions themselves have different needs. I mean, they're in different places. So if you look at Asia Pac, they're not as fully developed as, say, the main European market.
Yeah.
There's tertiary or secondary components of the European market, Eastern Europe's, some of the stands in that area, where some of the initial investments in digital health are taking place. And if you look at Asia Pac, it's a mix. Some countries like Korea and Taiwan and other areas are very advanced, and yet there's components in their hospital system that are catching up. And then you look at Singapore, obviously advanced, but again, going through, if you would, a escalation or build up, a new technology push. Australia, the same thing. So then you get into areas like Malaysia, and, the marketplace, Indonesia, and you start to see countries that are reinvesting. They're ready to get really deep into the digital health infrastructure. And so, it's a life cycle.
Yeah.
And where are you catching people in that life cycle? And what's the commitment of the government? And how do you support them strategically? And how do you support them with the maturity models if they roll it out? Yeah. And what do those plans look like? So HIMSS gets involved at the most sophisticated and at the beginning stages, depending upon where you are, and everything in between.
Yeah.
So it's all different.
Yeah.
And yet the challenges are the same.
That's true.
And that's the cool part.
Yeah. And I think about in some parts of to your point around different countries at different stages and stages of development, sometimes we see adoption of technology or even innovation in technology. We see a leapfrog from like the current state into something that would be seen as innovative by a country or a region that's been working hard at plugging away at, implementing an EMR or something like this. But as technology moves so quickly, it gives some of these developing areas an opportunity to kind of bypass, like take lessons from other parts of the world to be able to then say, well, this is what we need now. We don't even have to go through what's happened there. And the populations of some of these areas need to serve are at a level that we don't even see in the US, for example. So
one of the beauty of HIMSS, there's a game we used to play, and it's called Beeping Squares. And it's a development game for teamwork, etc.
Yeah.
And what it is sort of lay out, if you remember Twister, but on a bigger scale.
Okay.
And what you have to do as a team is make a path across sort of a field and stepping on these pieces. And if you step on something and it beeps, that's kind of like a little landmine and you stop there. Okay. Then you have to go back to your team and explain to them where the beep was so that the next person can go further.
Yep.
And then they'll hit something, and then the next, you get the idea.
Yeah.
That's what HIMSS does in a strange way. So we have a lot of great experts that predict, and we do modeling about what we think is going to happen. Then we learn from that. We find the beeping squares for people, and we bring together and aggravate those, aggravate. Well, they're probably aggravated, but we aggregate the people coming back in so that they can share those experiences. How can I help the next person go a little further with the experience that I had? And at the same time, set the goals and thought leadership so they know what's coming.
Yeah.
Because how you adjust for your healthcare system today or any infrastructure you're putting in has to be a foundation that's an investment in tomorrow as well. And this is where HIMSS is so vital to so many of the vendors, the systems, and all of the segments that we represent.
Yeah, I love that analogy, the beeping squares. And so I think about, lastly, how we might close out on, as we've got another day here in Paris at HIMSS Europe. What would you hope that attendees take away to perhaps communicate those beeping squares to each other in the different regions? I've really liked a lot of the conversations I've had where, whilst it's Europe, so many countries represent the region, and hearing individuals that represent a department within a health system. They may only be a team of one or two that from their particular country have found a great value in coming together within the region. But what are you hoping then everyone goes back to their systems to be able to then implement and see that progress continue?
Our fundamental goal for every person that comes to HIMSS is that they go back with some level of personal enrichment. So I made a contact, I learned something unique. It's going to help me in my career. Secondly, I found out there are resources available to me that I didn't know existed before, so I can take them back. And then third, they're going to be able to go back to their organization that they came from, or their practice, or their company, and say, now I understand strategically what I believe is coming. These are some adjustments that we need to make. We need to be thinking these thoughts because I just learned from these experts about what is on the horizon. And the horizon nowadays can be 6 months. It's never, when someone comes in and says, let me tell you what's going to happen 5 years from now, I kind of go, no. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
But, I need to be able to take like a 3-year view because nothing happens overnight, right? But I think that's what we want people to be able to do. There's a value proposition with being a HIMSS member and a value proposition of attending a HIMSS event that is just simply unique. It's fun. It's beautiful. You get to come to a place like Paris. It's wonderful. But the steak versus the sizzle, there's a lot of sizzle. Great place. But the steak you get to take home, if you would, or the tofu if you're a vegetarian. You'd be able to look up and say, this is the value I got out of it. And we want everyone to leave with a number of values.